different documents. So other than the direct working with the private sector, this is our 12th workshop we are conducting over the course of almost 1.5 years. And prior to this, we have improved and developed the capacity of over now 1,100 professionals, including the private sector, the public sector, and even from the corporates, including the both MNCs as well as the small and medium enterprises. But for today, our focus after the initial scene setting and discussion on Pakistan's official policy will be debating on two different themes that would be around the carbon registries, credit issuance, and secondly, the MRV system. So really looking forward to an engaging discussion. And with this, let me set some of the housekeeping rules. Along with Zoom, today's session is being live streamed on our social media platforms, where we have been joined by some of our esteemed guests. The session is being recorded and the video will be posted online. You're welcome to revisit the discussion later and feel free to share it within your networks as well. We most certainly invite questions, comments from the people who have joined us and the colleagues at the end or even as the session goes. Please feel free to write them in the chat box or the Q&A box on the right-hand side. And please have the chat box open in a window as well, or you can also indicate that you want to speak by clicking the raise hand tab on the right side of the chat window. So yeah, let me quickly introduce the key experts we'll be having with us over the 2 days. We're again very pleased to have been joined with us, Dr. Sajid Amin Javed. Dr. Sajid is currently the Deputy Executive Director Research at SDPI. We also have with us Mr. Vincent. He is a Regional Representative Asia and the Pacific at Vera. We will be joined by shortly by Dr. Irfan Yusuf. He's a consultant at UNDP and the World Bank, and also known as one of the key experts of the carbon markets in Pakistan. We'll also be joined by Mr. SM Kamran. He's a senior consultant, SPAR 60 program for Pakistan. And he has also served in the Prime Minister's Advisory Committee for the carbon markets. We're joined by Mr. Rahman Yusuf. He's currently the carbon project development expert at Resources Future Private Limited. I'll introduce these people as the session goes as well. But before we go into any of the technical discussion, let me invite Dr. Sajid Amin Javed for his formal opening of the workshop. Dr. Sajid, as I previously mentioned, is currently the Deputy Executive Director of Research in SDPI and is also heading the policy solutions lab. So with this, Dr. Sajid, over to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Obed. I hope you can hear me very clearly. Thank you so much.
Yes.
I think one of my key introduction for today's session that is most relevant is that I'm a student of climate finance. And I have been sort of trying to link the macroeconomic policy, the financial policy, and the climate change. And this is where I've been studying the sort of climate finance landscape, that what's happening to the overall climate finance needs and the provision of it. And if you see, there is a reverse relationship. The climate finance needs are increasing dramatically, exponentially, but at the same time, the availability of climate finance, particularly the international climate finance, the grant-based finance, that is on the decline. And that is really one of the key challenges that we will be seeing sort of more seriously in the coming days. So to me, I think the one key solution that remains with developing countries, the global south particularly, who are most vulnerable to climate change, is to develop the system which is least reliant. I mean, of course, we need international climate commitments, finance commitments to come through to realize, but at the same time, we need to have systems which are least reliant in terms of mobilizing climate finance for our own needs. And I think there can be sort of green bonds, many other things, but one of the key tools that is really coming up now, and which is really also having the buy-in and the ownership, both nationally and internationally, as the carbon markets. And that, I think, one of the key entry point, and this is what you are also mentioning for the in entire 2 days conference, that carbon markets will be coming up a more strong institutional framework to mobilize climate finance through multiple channels. And I think this is where we need to, I mean, I think we're already late in terms of, because they're already in practice. So we don't really have any time to wait further. So we need to sort of prepare a better preparedness, better design of our development planning, better design of our climate finance strategies, linking it to the carbon markets, better linking our fiscal policy, the carbon market policies, interlinking with them, so that we are better prepared to sort of leverage the global rise or the global phenomena, the landscape that is emerging as the carbon markets. And I think Pakistan is already on it. And I look forward in next 2 days to listen from your very distinguished speakers and participants as how can Pakistan better prepare to develop effective, efficient carbon markets. So this is really, I think the need of the hour. And thank you so much for organizing this discussion. And on behalf of SDPI and other partners that you have with you, development partners, I would really like to thank all those people who have really joined us. And we look forward to listening your thoughts, reiterating that the availability of international climate finance will be on the decline in the near future, in the foreseeable future. Developing own instruments, systems, the processes, the policies, and the markets to mobilize climate finance will be very, very critical to take development agenda forward. I give it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, to Sajid. And yes, I fully agree with the two key points that have been mentioned. We all really need to understand, I mean, at the end of the day, now things, it's not just about the climate, it's about the economics, it's about the finance at the same time. And the way that things have actually developed over the past few times, I mean, you cannot sort of separate climate change from your development agendas. And especially since, just like Dr. Sajid talked about, with the recent changes in the climate finance governance, the US withdrawal from the Paris Agreement, the carbon or any market-based mechanism domain is going to get more and more competitive. This means that more companies will be developing these projects. And this is exactly the time where we really need to understand how to sort of invest in these high quality projects, how to improve the integrity of the projects. And this is where I believe I'll shortly be coming to Zainab for the scene setting presentation. But this is where at this time, we actually have to start with the private sector. So we really need to understand what it means to generate high quality carbon credits. What are some of its conditionalities that we actually want to bring in? The second and one of the very important points that we'll also sort of need to link everything around the carbon market is just, we have been seeing the too much debate about the US tariff debate, but this is not just the US. At the same time, we need to see it from another angle of the tariff, which is the carbon tariffs. Either it is coming in the form of taxes, in the form of carbon levy. Again, many of you know that under the recent budget, as well as since Pakistan is under the IMF Resilience and Sustainability Facility, there is now, again, it's not a direct carbon direct tax, but it's sort of an indirect levy, which is part of the diesel and petrol price. So that's again going to eventually impact the industry and eventually impact the consumer as well. So that is a debate that is really needs to be very strongly linked, and what makes the case strong for Pakistan. And the second, and perhaps one of the angle which many of us have been looking into for some time, especially the textile industry, and that is around the case of carbon border adjustment mechanism, and not just the EU-led, but also perhaps these all of these different countries are coming up with the export competitiveness, sort of export compliance mechanisms, and this is again making that if Pakistan's business sector has to remain environmentally competitive, it has to reduce the environmental footprint of its supply chain. So we'll go into the details and let Zainab sort of speak a bit more on that. So again, the way the overall 2 days, again, shouldn't be calling it the complete 2 days, we'll be seeing it from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. But the way, what the key points that we'll be discussing around initially after the scene setting, that would be on what Pakistan's carbon market policy is and what pathways do exist for these industries to engage. The second one would be around moving towards what is the registry. How do the registries work? And how do we actually register projects under those? And the last one and the most important component would be on the MRVs. On the second day, I believe Salha is also here. We'll be going into deep diving into more of like what case studies already exist in Pakistan, what success stories exist in Pakistan. So with this, let us move towards the first section of the workshop that will be on carbon markets fundamentals and the policy design for Pakistan. And for this, I'll call Zainab Naeem. Zainab is currently an associate fellow and also heading the Center for Ecological Sustainability and Circular Economy at SDPI. And if I can sort of request MIS team to kindly share the presentation as well. So yeah, with this, Zainab, over to you. Zainab, can you sort of hear us? Zainab, over to you. Sure. Sure. Just in the meanwhile, as Zainab is joining, so I mean, the way the things link here sort of is that when we talk about the carbon markets, we all fully understand how this uh, need for the climate finance is improving, especially climate finance or climate transition becoming a very important part of the development agenda of the private sector
Yes,
there as well.
Ubaid, can you hear me now?
Yes, Zainab, we can hear you loud and clear. So with this,
Yes.
back to you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. So I'll be briefly setting the scene because I do look forward to all of the speakers for sharing great details and around technicalities. Next slide, please. So first of all, we all need to understand why there's a need for carbon markets in the world and why world is transitioning towards the markets. This is a snapshot of what has been happening in just 1 year. Last year, 2024, you see there were flooding, there were droughts, there were wildfires. The disasters that used to come over a span or decade after a decade or over a span of 20 years, we are now experiencing within the same year. And so it has been a sort of an emergency situation throughout the world. And climate change recognizes no borders and it is affecting everyone. But the difference is that people with resources are able to cope with it. As of now, people with limited resources are suffering more. So it has disproportionate impacts. Next, please. And that's why the world is looking for strategies to cope with climate change and also the strategies to align how climate financing instruments can be utilized or leveraged to improve the climate action. Hamza, isko ek aur click kijiye, please. So for economic case, of financing the mechanisms to adopt to climate change or to mitigate climate change, there are different mechanisms available throughout the world, and especially for companies and private sector organizations who are willing to, adapt to climate change or mitigate climate change. They're looking for such mechanisms that are blended and that are giving them more opportunities for revenue generation as well. And so carbon markets is one of them. Hamza, please, next, please. This is an incomplete slide. Next, please. Next. Yes. So this is why do we need alternate financing mechanisms? Of course, to integrate sustainability, environment and macro policies together, as climate change is now a macroeconomic challenge that the entire world is facing at this moment, and also to develop industry and environmental sustainability, because we are working towards Agenda 2030, which means leaving no one behind. And even any agenda that comes beyond 2030, it's going to be aligned with leaving no one behind aspect. So we have to make sure that it's a just process where all stakeholders they are made part of the process and they do not suffer when we talk about moving towards climate ambition goals. So to develop market of sustainability initiatives, carbon markets, circular economy, permaculture, these are some trends, but carbon markets is something that's a top trend in the world, which is being adopted as of now. Next, please. Next, please. Thank you. So, the need for alternate financing mechanisms, of course, this is just not one aspect that to ensure climate action, we have to transition towards financing mechanism that supports the transition. Another aspect is that now the developed countries, the developed regions are coming up with polluter pays principles with taxation because they have their goals also to become climate neutral regions in the world. And for that, they're imposing taxes not just within their regions, but also in the regions from where they're engaged in business activities like trading. For example, CBAM is one of them, ETS is one of them, and then there are more, directives and regulations being issued for the developing countries to ensure that they are transitioning towards climate neutrality. And to achieve it, private sector needs to engage in carbon markets financing mechanisms so that their revenue gets improved also, and especially when they're trying to align their value chains towards climate neutral agenda. Next, please. Next, please. So globally, carbon markets, as I mentioned, it's a top trend in the world for capital flows and for achieving climate ambitions. The least developed countries are already engaged in carbon markets. You see the map of Asia, you see the trading markets in Africa. We are basically the global south is basically the sellers and buyers are from the global north. Since 2020, voluntary markets have been LDC's primary credit source. And then under clean development mechanism, before RED, we had carbon markets, RED plus and clean development mechanism was introduced to engage the world in voluntary carbon markets mechanism. Pakistan was also involved in the first phase when projects were developed initially, especially around forestry, but then we were not able to engage with the directly or more ambitiously with buyers only because we did not have our own policy at that time. Next, please. So, if we talk about why Pakistan needs to be engaged in carbon markets, first of all, is depending upon our climate vulnerability. These are the financing needs that is required for Pakistan to adopt to climate change and also to mitigate climate change. Our adaptation needs stands at 7 billion to 14 billion annually dollars, and then finance needs between 2023 to 2030 are projected to be around 348 billion dollars. And then, of course, Indus Delta is degrading, which is the backbone of the entire adaptation processes that Pakistan needs for achieving climate ambitions. So that's why, because and also focused towards, if we focus towards the overall climate vulnerability, we are one of the most vulnerable regions, and we have seen the manifestation in 2022, and not just that, even now in 2025, the kind of heat waves we are experiencing, the kind of resilience that's needed, financing mechanisms are required, and because the developed countries are not able to commit the kind of financing that's required for the developing countries like Pakistan to achieve transition towards climate neutrality. That's why we need to look for alternate financing mechanisms, and that's why it's extremely important for Pakistan to engage in carbon markets. Next, please. So this is a basic timeline on how the debate around carbon markets started. It started from Kyoto Protocol. Then we had Chicago Climate Exchange, followed by, ETS was developed at European region level. Then CDM was there, and in 2015 we had the Paris Agreement where Article 6 was initiated. And then come after that, Civil Aviation Organization started adopting carbon credits. Then 2020 in 2021 we had again, there were some amendments made in carbon overall mechanism of the carbon markets flow in the world. And in now recently in 2024 at COP29, the operationalization around carbon markets was finally adopted at global level. So Article 6 has been operationalized. Next, please. Thank you. So, what is a carbon credit? As you can see the definition here, it is equal to 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide, or in some markets, equivalent CO2 equivalent gases are bought and sold through international brokers, online retailers, and trading platforms. So, we sell and buy carbon credit. This is the definition. And usually, the carbon markets, carbon credits can be of two types: reduction credits and removal credits. Reduction means to avoid the avoidance credits, which means implementing technology that is used to avoid the the carbon dioxide emissions being released. And for that, companies can engage in reduction credits mechanisms. and this is specially tailored for renewable energy related or operations. And then coming towards removal credits or carbon dioxide removals, this is basically the sequestration or removing the carbon dioxide from your atmosphere, from the environment, including nature-based solutions, afforestation projects, or technical solutions such as applying the direct air capture or storage technology. So these are the two kind of credits that we have when we are talking about carbon markets. Next, please. Overall, there are two marketplaces in the world: voluntary and compliance. So, in the international markets, we have compliance and voluntary. Compliance means they are following Article 6 mechanism. Voluntary means they are tailored as per the industries or different corporations. And then there are domestic markets. Some countries have adopted their own tailored based carbon markets, compliance market, by developing their own policies. For example, now Pakistan is also moving towards voluntary compliance, because we have sort of developed our own policy framework where companies are being encouraged to adopt or to engage in carbon markets. So this is a gradual transition from voluntary towards compliance. Examples are shared which countries are involved in compliance. You can see in under Article 6.2, 6.4, and then there is Corsia. And in context of voluntary, there throughout the world, these are very common. They follow certain carbon standards for auditing, for example, Vera standards, gold standards. And then in context of domestic, there are different countries who have their own crediting schemes, for example, South Africa. Then there is ETS in Europe, and then there are crediting mechanisms, for example, in Thailand, under the voluntary emission trading reduction program. Next, please. Next, please. Thank you. So carbon standards or GHG crediting program refers to complete set of rules, procedures, and methodologies according to which certified carbon credits are generated and issued. These standards are usually followed in compliance and voluntary markets, but mostly in voluntary market, because under compliance markets, the countries can also set up their own certain standards. They are developed and governed by standard organizations, for example, Vera standard, gold standard, and there are some other standards that are followed as part of third party audit system in order for the companies to get the issuance of carbon credits based on the audits that are performed by these standards. Next, please. So these are the examples of some standards: verified carbon standard, gold standard, Plan Vivo, or Vera standard. Next, please. Now, because CBAM, and this is just one of the international regulations that we have, there are others also, like
Janab, just sorry to interrupt you. There's a comment. If you could just go slightly slow, just so the people can,
I'm sorry, I thought, the
No worries, no
agenda is a
worries.
bit packed, so I had to
No worries, no
rush.
worries. Take it.
But we will be sharing these presentation slides, and I'm available to answer any questions. Apologies for the rush. So under CBAM, because we have now EU carbon border adjustment mechanism, because EU wants to transition towards carbon neutrality, and so they want to impose penalties on any imports that they are doing from developing countries, and developing countries who are exporting to EU, if they're not able to meet the carbon emission reduction standards, or the GHG emission reduction protocols that they have to follow in order to export to EU. So this is this is a more or less broader definition of what CBAM is. It's a regulation that is now very much there. Apart from CBAM, there are many other regulations coming up. For example, eco directive regulations, especially for different sectors, different industries, including textiles, as Zubaid mentioned, because decarbonization pathway is a pathway that is being now followed by developed regions, especially in EU. But CBAM is, as I mentioned, it's just one of them. There are other regions who are coming up with their own regulations also, and those are the developed countries, mostly where developing countries like Pakistan does their exports. So in order to meet the international standards, it's important that companies in developing countries start engaging in carbon markets, start buying their credits, and start imposing climate action related programs within their value chains. They need to start, before doing that, they need to start measuring their emissions, the scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions, which are termed as embedded emissions throughout the value chain. And then they need to they need to have a certificate, or they need to have proper mapping of their emissions, so that they can show it to the countries where they are exporting, and those countries, if they will verify it, and then they will reduce the taxes, or they will not impose penalties. But because certain countries want to make it more straightforward process, so they are coming up with local regulations so that their companies don't have to get penalized by EU directly. Rather, if they start paying taxes within their country, by if they're not following climate neutrality, or if they're not able to limit their emission reduction, then they pay taxes within their countries, and then countries will issue them certificates, or as the clearance sort of certificate, and they can show those certificates to EU also in context of CBAM. For example, now Pakistan is coming up with polluter pay sort of regulations. Carbon taxation is one of them. But in case of there are chances that local CBAM sort of mechanism gets imposed too, where companies will be directed to share their GHG emission reports throughout their value chains, and if they're not meeting the standards, the upper cap which is imposed, then they might have to be penalized locally. So this will help the companies in a way when they're exporting to EU, so they are paying most of the penalties locally, and so when they start exporting, their value chains will be cleaned. Next, please. Now, initially, these are the 6 sectors where CBAM is getting implemented as per the timelines and trajectories, but textile sector is the upcoming sector that will be integrated. And even if that is not integrated under CBAM, that is being integrated in EU eco-design directives. Next, please. Next, please. Okay, so this is the timeline of CBAM. It has already started. It is very much there since 2023. And if you go and visit the CBAM, it's there on the website. I think EU CBAM website. If you check it out, you can see the timeline of implementation. Next, please. I think I've also mentioned the timeline here. First reporting was due in 2023. Transition time is in 2024, and in 2025 they will be rolling it out by issuing statement of emission calculations. In 2026, they will be giving deadline for filing the last CBAM report to all the developing countries and all other relevant sectors. And by 2030, CBAM will be applied to all the imported items. So it's just not the 6 sectors that I've mentioned. It's going to be throughout all the sectors under which EU does trade with other countries. Next, please. So, if I discuss overall carbon markets framework, and I'm sure there's going to be a lecture on Article 6, and also around carbon market policy in Pakistan, carbon pricing policy especially. I think it's a very good opportunity. But before engaging in carbon markets, if companies are not aware of their own GHG emissions, of their own value chain, of their own emitted emissions, it will always be difficult for companies to participate in the carbon markets. This is a very genuine question that gets asked from us, whenever we are delivering workshops, that how to engage in carbon markets. I think before questioning anyone on how we can be engaged, it's important that companies start reporting their emissions, start their disclosure reporting, so that they are able to understand on which projects throughout their value chains gets qualified for engaging in carbon credits mechanism or carbon credits markets. Assessments are there, feasibility is there, potential is there. It's a growing market and it's still booming, especially since 2020. So I think it's a marketplace that companies are unable to understand it yet, but it's not difficult once you have your own emission reports with you. That's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zainab, for sharing the initial agenda of what the markets are, what are some of the kinds of markets. We'll definitely be going into a lot more details of it. But just for the introduction of Rahman and Vincent from Vera, just to sort of give them a good indication of the people who have joined us today. So we have a lot of private sector industries present here. So yeah, our idea was to initially start from a bit initially giving of what the markets are, what the CBAM, and why this carbon market is very important for them. And with this, what we're going to do next, before coming to you for the registries and the others, we'll very quickly again take another like 10 to 12 minutes to sort of let them know what exactly have for them within the carbon market policy space of Pakistan. So if MIS team can kindly allow me to sort of share the screen. Okay, yeah, it's visible. What I'm going to do is to sort of very quickly take you through a brief journey of what opportunities and pathways exist for the carbon markets in Pakistan. And that is again going to be taking a lead. And I'll sort of try to keep it a bit slow and just sort of explain what is exactly now the process if anyone wants to engage in the carbon markets of Pakistan. Definitely. So this is again a continuation of what Zainab has already mentioned. And if I can request the MIS team to please confirm if my slides are sort of moving. If they don't, then please do let me know. Up till as of now, what a debate has actually informed of is that it is actually becoming clearer in Pakistan that climate change is now being mainstream into the development agenda. You can already see that from the improving policy space, the resilience and sustainability facility under the IMF program. And this is again simply because what Pakistan has now done is it has actually started realizing that now the cost of climate action is much more higher than the cost of uh, climate catastrophes is much higher than the cost of doing the climate action. But the point that eventually comes up, how do you actually bring the finance that is necessary? I mean, if I talk about energy transition, if I talk about climate adaptation, we all fully understand that this all, it has a logistical cost. It has that are very imperative for driving this transition. So how does exactly the money comes in a country that is already fiscally deficit? There are a lot of economic issues going on. And yes, I see one of the questions that were mentioned in the chat of we'll come to that on how the revenues collected or taxes collected through the carbon levy will be utilized for on the social side. We'll come to that on the question in a bit. But the idea is that now we actually have to, climate action is again not a choice. It is something that must be done. What we have to actually do is to identify those projects that can actually be developed through these different markets-based mechanisms such as carbon markets. And when we actually talk about that, the government of Pakistan just at the end of the last year and sort of also officially approved at the very start of this year did introduce their policy guidelines for trading under the carbon markets. They do highlight how Pakistan needs to operate within the, since they did use the word, will become to a bit of technicalities on how the word, the policy document used the word compliance, that a bit different than just talking directly about the compliance market. We'll come to that in a bit. But now the point is that we do have an understanding of how the things should go. And now there is a government policy to sort of address that or answer some of the questions that many of our project developers who wants to come in the carbon market space, they do have this document at the guideline of what they can actually follow through. So now, again, very quickly, Zainab already has sort of mentioned it, but let me sort of link it a bit as well, because when we talk about the Paris Agreement, we all fully understand the Paris Agreement does want us to sort of share, to keep the temperature within 2 degrees centigrade rise by the end of this century, ideally to 1.5, but we have already went past to it. So it's discussing that. But the main point that Paris Agreement does talk about it, how these developed countries can actually, or how they can actually support the developing countries or the underdevelopment countries in getting those finances. So what the basic concept or the very initial concept of carbon markets indicate is that the developing countries such as Pakistan or the underdevelopment countries through their climate action can actually do some of the projects to reduce their carbon emissions. And then the outcome of those projects can actually be sold to other countries or anyone who wants to sort of buy it. This is how they can actually generate money. And the one who buys those will reflect those credits as their efforts in reducing the emissions. For example, let's suppose that any country such as Singapore or France actually has committed that they want to reduce their country's emissions by 50% by the end of 2030 or 2035 within their nationally determined contribution or any of their climate commitments. And they can, so what they can actually do is that they can reflect that I have purchased this amount of carbon credits from Pakistan, and this will then be shown into their achievements. So that is exactly the basic idea behind the carbon markets, and any country or anyone can actually do these projects, sold those, generate those credits, sold those credits into the international different markets, and sort of get some of the money from those. Now, within the Paris Agreement, how this is actually governed is under through different articles. First of all, we have the Article 6.2, which is that within the Article 6.2, there is sort of a bilateral country-to-country agreement under which the credits can be sold to any other country or a buyer, but through the government of Pakistan. I'll briefly explain you what the exactly process is going a bit forward. And then comes the Article 6.4. It also is a process that has to go through the government of Pakistan, but again, there is a centralized body. The whole process would actually have to be that is the UNFCCC. And 6.8 is sort of a non-market based approach. That is where we talk about the carbon pricing, the carbon trading, ETS, and etc. So I'm just checking the questions if my slides are sort of moving. Yeah, sure. So coming next, Zainab has already talked about, but I'll also sort of touch a bit upon that just to sort of explain how the carbon market policy is basically dealing with those two mechanisms. So firstly, the point behind explaining these two is that either if you go to compliance market or a voluntary carbon market, the pricing actually differs a lot. So what the compliance market sort of indicates, it's sort of a cap and trade system in which the government imposes a cap on different industries that they cannot emit more than this amount. For example, there's a cap on the oil and gas industry that there are some kind of the targets that they actually have to achieve. But if they sort of finds it challenging for within their current operations to sort of achieve those targets, what they can actually do is to sort of purchase credits from an entity that is sort of generating or saving those emissions. So this is the way in which they can actually comply or come under a compliance. And these mechanisms are again very successful within the European Union, such as the European Union ETS exists. So as of now, in Pakistan, there is no compliance market that exists. In the longer run, there will be, but as of now, Pakistan does not have this in place. Now comes towards the voluntary carbon markets. Voluntary carbon markets are again any organization, even an individual or even any entity, they can sort of voluntarily trade within the carbon markets. One thing that I should mention over here is that when you see the policy documents, because I'll be going through the policy document shortly, one word that you might see come within the policy document would be of the word compliance, but that is to sort of indicate what actually any project or any developer can actually do under the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. So there is a market, voluntary carbon market that is governed through the Article 6, and then there is a voluntary carbon market. I mean, for example, any of the entities, organization would have the approval to go beyond the guidelines which the government has actually given and come in direct relations. And under those conditions, they just would have to sort of register or their projects within the official registry of Pakistan. So there are sort of two markets. One is through which the Article 6 market, which would have to go through the government, and then there's another market in which you don't have to sort of follow these guidelines, and would have to register your project within the documents as well. Now, the point behind these is that since any compliance market has actually this legal binding, they have strict government regulations. So the price that you obtain from any compliance carbon market or trading your project within a compliance carbon market that are comparatively much higher as compared to the pricing you actually get in a voluntary carbon market. For example, it's again the data of almost 6 months old, but the price of the compliance was somewhere around like 15 to 50 USD, and the same for the voluntary was much lower, roughly around like starting from 0.3. But the way that things have developed, especially post COP29, when the operationalization of Article 6 was done, as well as since many countries will be announcing their NDC targets shortly, the pricing of the voluntary carbon markets is expected to also grow exponentially. So now sort of coming towards what is exactly Pakistan's carbon market policy, what has it actually been approved under it, and how actually a project can actually come about submitting its projects to the government of Pakistan for taking it through the Article 6, carbon market regime. So this document is again available on the Ministry of Climate Change and Environmental Coordination's website. You all can go and see the document. I'll request any one of our colleagues to please also paste the link of that policy within the chat box as well. So for any organization, let's suppose we'll sort of take it through a case study. If you actually want to sort of go through the process, the first thing that you exactly would have to do is to sort of develop this project idea node, which is I've also sort of list down these steps below. The first step that actually has to be done is exactly developing a project idea node. This is to be developed by the project developer. It's again a very simplified structure in which you have to simply tell where the project is happening, what is the scope of the project, what is the area under which the project is done, and you would also have to sort of mention what is its mitigation potential and estimation of the credits that will be sort of generated through this project. So again, the purpose of having a project information node pin is to sort of bring the project to the pipeline of Pakistan, where it will be evaluated to see how strongly the project does align with the Pakistan's national determined contributions, the priority areas which Pakistan has sort of also identified, and again to sort of see, and then they again is for the government to sort of analyze it. And once the government actually goes to the project information node, they does issue a letter of intent. The letter of intent actually means that you have a go ahead to start developing your detailed project design document, which is also known as the PDD, which is again the third step. So firstly, you have to develop the project information node. Then you're issued a letter of intent, which is again from the nationally designated authority of the country. In case of Pakistan, that is the Ministry of Climate Change and Environmental Coordination. And that LOI would mean that you can now go ahead and start developing your project design document. Now, the project design document are comparatively a lot more detailed document. You do have, as per the policy, a time frame of developing them within 24 months. You can definitely do them before that as well, but that is again the timeline. And again, developing a PDD in the whole project development phase is one of the most important tasks, because you actually have to, this is where you sort of ensure that there's no quality gap that comes in. You have to ensure the transparency, you have to ensure the integrity, and there are a number of other checks we will be talking about. But the only two checks I'll be talking, or perhaps the one check that I'll be talking about, since there's a lot of industry sitting here, that is the concept of additionality. So in very simple words, additionality generally means that for getting carbon credits or carbon finance for any of your projects, whatever initiative you take should be other than your business as usual scenario. For example, if an industry is already sort of had the development of a solar power plant within its development plan, so the business as usual, this might not go as a very strong project for coming under the carbon market regime, because what is now expected is that renewable energy is already economically more viable option as compared to these other alternate sources. So that again is not something where an industry would need additional finance to support the climate action. Definitely there are renewable energy projects are being created. There are different cases, especially if you're looking into the conversion process, that is where it sort of starts making sense. But again, if there are components that, the basic idea is that you need to do something which you cannot do under your business as usual scenario without the availability of that finance. So that which you cannot do under your business as usual scenario without the availability, that is additionality. As we go through the workshop, we'll sort of explain these additionality concept further as well. Then there are a lot of different other check marks which the ministry have mentioned, such as the concept of the permanence, such as the concept of different additionalities. And this is also where we already have the colleagues of Vera with us here today. but this is also where you actually have to get your projects accredited with different standards that Zanab sort of talked about as well. So once your project design document that is approved, the NDA or the National Designated Authority or for Pakistan Ministry of Climate Change, that will be issue an NOC. And as soon as any buyer is interested in that project, a letter of authorization will be issued. And after that, you can sort of generate net revenue through your projects as well. So that is again a 4-phase process that you eventually have to go through during the overall for any industry. That's again a process that has been discussed. Again, sort of trying to explain it in a lot simple words. I fully agree that there are some of the terminologies that might have used in a different tone. Will definitely, for those who are going into more technical discussion, will definitely go deep down as well. And then this concept would sort of start making a lot more sense. Now, when we talk about the priority sector, let's sort of very briefly see which of the projects are currently very important for the case of Pakistan, not just only for the case of Pakistan, but again, it all depends very strongly on where the demand of or what the demand of these projects from different ends is. So yeah, first of all, talking about the waste sector, as of now, waste to energy projects, they're all pretty much all 100% rate is allowed for all of those projects. If their waste management projects are there, Pakistan has just recently went through one of these projects as well. So that is again a very strong area, and I believe a lot of industries are doing that. So yeah, definitely it makes a lot of really good sense. For the transport, electric vehicles actually has sort of started getting a lot of very strong demand, especially for countries such as Norway. There are two to three angles that can actually be adopted. One is definitely the use of electrification of your transport. Then definitely there's also demand coming in for the use of sustainable fuels. Green hydrogen does have some cases, but yeah, it's again, as of now, for the developing countries, it's a bit more tricky. Then there's very strong case for the use of mass transit systems. That also has very strong demand for any project that has to come in within the urban market. For the industries, there are a lot of opportunities. Any initiative that can actually reduce the process emissions of the industry. So yeah, just to sort of put a more focus, any initiative that can actually reduce the process emissions of any industry, that has a very strong relevance for the carbon market, whether it is sort of looking into the fuel switching, transitioning from fossil fuel or particularly coal to any of the other fuels, coming up with any of the even your total quality management approaches, improving energy efficiency. So a lot of 100% of trade is allowed for all of these industrial projects as well. And even for the industry, especially, there's also again baseline data that's again it's important for all of them, but particularly for the industries. There's again for the agriculture side. If you look into again, if I look into the forestation side, that is actually as of now one of the areas where there is the most potential available, especially if any of the industries wants to do this under the CSR initiatives. There is a strong potential that exists because for any of the forestation projects, it's comparatively easier to sort of to do the emission accountings. To sort of understand how, you can do different techniques such as GIS mechanisms to see what is exactly the plantation count that is there. You do know the types of different techniques that can actually be used to sort of measure those mitigation. But at the same time, for some of these agricultural areas, such as particularly looking into the methane side, the livestock waste, that does become challenging, especially when you talk about how to sort of measure their baseline. So that is an area where it does become a bit challenging as well. Energy sector, I think we talked about it. There's a lot of scope that exists, especially when you're looking into, you might have know that Weta has just also very recently improved that the methodology for the coal to clean credit initiative. So the projects that can actually transition your grid from the fossil fuel intensive projects towards the low carbon development projects, or initiatives that can sort of support the early retirement of fossil fuel, industries, fossil fuels utilization within the power sector that have a very high relevance. Just installing new renewable energy would become again a lot trickier again because of the concept of conditionality. But again, going beyond the power sector, there's a very strong scope that exists within the energy efficiency side. There are even credits for the transmission. Pakistan already is trading some of these projects under the VCM for the improved cook stoves. So that is something Pakistan is already doing. And just to sort of answer one of the questions that does Pakistan already has a carbon market? So again, the answer is that if you look, if you want to sort of trade in VCMs, you again, other than the Article 6 market, you can do it anytime. Even as of now, Pakistan has almost roughly 12 to 13 projects that are being traded within the VCMs. You really don't have to go through all of these 4 documents that I've sort of highlighted. I think you already know about the Indus Delta Blue project that has actually achieved very good carbon pricing as well. So again, for the VCM, you can tap into it as of now as we speak as well. So yeah, and in the last one, I'll just be ending very shortly. Green hydrogen, green ammonia also has some of the very strong potential that exists. The last point before closing and going toward the registries that I would sort of mention is regarding the fee structure that is sort of also mentioned within the policy document. That there's a fee structure. For example, let's suppose if there's any project that is generated almost 100 million credits, so 5% of those credits, and if this project is going through the Article 6 market, so 5% of these credits generated by the project will be deducted at source in the form of these credits, and those will actually be accounted within your nationally determined contribution. So which means that any project that goes to the Article 6 market through the government of Pakistan, 5% of these credits would actually be counted in as Pakistan's climate commitment. So they would be exactly deducted at the source. The second point that actually comes up around is for the corresponding adjustment, there is a defined fee of 12% from the net revenues. For those who don't know corresponding adjustment, that means that, for example, if let's say any country, if it's Australia, South Africa, if anyone wants to sort of buy these credits from, let's suppose, the government of Sindh. So these credits, which they sort of buy from the government of Sindh, they would be sort of added into their climate activities, and they would eventually be subtracted from the government of Sindh or Pakistan's carbon emission repository. So that is sort of called known as a corresponding adjustment. And there is again a fee of almost 12% of the net revenues. And there's also further classification that 6% of this goes to the provincial government, and the remaining 6% actually goes to the National Climate Fund that Pakistan has actually established, and that will eventually be used for different mitigation, adaptation, and L&D projects. So there's 5% deduction of the credits at the source. Then there's 12% fee of in the form of corresponding adjustment. And the last one is an administrative cost, that is 1% of gross revenues that would be generated from the sale of carbon credits, which actually means that there are different administrative costs, such as the costs utilized for these setting of these documents, for coordination with the UNFCCC, for developing the PDD, not for developing the PDD, but the work that the ministry, the National Authority of Pakistan would actually be doing. So that is again a fee structure, and as per the policy that as compared to the global, if you look at it globally, this is roughly accounts to roughly around 1.7 to $2.7 per credit, and that as compared to the global average is comparatively low. And the ease is that Ministry of Climate Change is actually providing to acting as a one window facilitation for all of these investors as well. So that is the whole process which eventually has to go through, and I'll definitely be sharing these details for anyone who sort of wants, will be sort of trying to come into these facilitation for all of these investors as well. So has to through sort of to details with us, go through those as well. So that was, I believe, all from mine regarding the policy that is already in place. And yes, I believe just open up some of the questions. And yes, power generation from biomass. Iqbal Sahab does have a very strong case. Will sort of once we start going into the projects, we will let you know how it makes a case for Pakistan, especially the theme that will be highlighted by Rahman Saab from the Resources Future. He'll be sort of speaking on this front as well. That was more and less from my end. Those you have questions, I'll sort of try that while the next presentation is going to sort of respond to your questions within that document. But that was more on the policy end. And if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them further in the chat Q&A box. With this, we'll be moving towards a next session that is more on the registry side. And we're again very pleased to have been joined by a few of our experts. We couldn't, Ms. Selina couldn't join us, but we have been joined with us by Mr. Rahman Yusuf. He's the carbon project development expert at Resources Future Private Limited. Thank you so much, Rahman sir, for joining us. And we're also very pleased to have been joined with us by Mr. Vincent Tan, the regional representative Asia and the Pacific of Vera. You might have heard the name of Vera a couple of times. So yeah, he'll sort of also see. So before coming to Rahman Saab for first highlighting the case, there's just one slide which I'll request Nisma to sort of showcase on the screen just to sort of explain what exactly a registry is in just 2 to 3 or 4 minutes. And then I'll be coming to Rahman Saab for his discussion around the project development essentials for registry validation. So with this, Nisma, I hope you're with us and over to you. Thank you.
Yes, I think maybe I'll share my own screen.
Yeah, sure. Please.
Yes, thank you. Okay, this should be fine. Can you see it? Is it okay?
Yes, it's perfect.
So I think I'll just start by before like our other colleagues take a deep dive into the concept. I'll just briefly start by unpacking a little bit about what carbon registries are and why they matter, especially now as Pakistan seeks to engage more seriously in carbon markets. So just to begin with the definition. So a carbon registry is primarily an online platform, which exists mainly to track, manage, and record carbon projects and the credits that are issued against them. So you may think of registries as performing a similar role to, say, maybe a bank ledger or a bank statement, where every credit and transaction is recorded. And then at the same time, you may also consider them to be like libraries, maybe, where all documents related to a carbon project or a project are stored and are viewable to the public. Then again, they also act as, let's say, quality seals or certification bodies, which sort of check that everything is in place and meets the standards that have been set for a project to be registered with the carbon market. So in all, basically a registry can perform multiple functions simultaneously and may be considered as, let's say, the backbone of the system that manages the whole market itself. So among other features, registries are designed to ensure three main things: transparency, traceability, and credibility. So they maintain clear records of what carbon projects exist globally, what those projects are claiming in terms of emission reductions or removals, and whether those claims are, let's say, legit or have been verified or at least can be verified. So as a developer, you may have a great project, but without engaging with a reliable registry, your project would remain invisible to the world at large and essentially have low credibility in the eyes of international buyers or investors, because at the end of the day, you do not have an externally, let's say, verified label on it. So just to highlight, let's say the main question is that what role do registries play in carbon markets? I've just divided their role into like 5 key functions just to explain it a little here. So first and foremost, they register carbon projects, as I already said, which includes formally listing them in the system After verifying that they have met all the basic eligibility and documentation requirements that I think some of my colleagues already discussed. And then this is the first step, and it usually occurs during the earlier stages of the project development, most oftenly before even implementation starts. Then you, let's say, registries also host all key documents related to a project. So these documents may range from the project design document and baseline calculations or methodologies to all the monitoring plans and verification reports. I think Beth has already discussed some of them. And so basically everything that is needed to prove that the project is real and effective is stored within a registry as well and is available for the public to view. Then registries also track ownership of carbon credits. So let's just say like a land registry tells us who owns a plot of land. A carbon registry tells us who owns the credits issued against a carbon project. So when a project earns credits, those credits are issued to an account on the registry. And when someone buys or retires those credits, the transaction is also recorded again within the same registry. And then coming down to maybe the most important aspect of registries is that they help prevent double counting, which is, again, one of the biggest risks associated with trading in carbon markets. Because double counting basically occurs when a given amount of emission reductions is, let's say, counted twice, once as part of the seller's portfolio and then again as part of the buyer's portfolio because of maybe lack of transparency or just an imbalance between calculations there. So what a carbon registry does is that it keeps a transparent and traceable trail of all credits and their status. So once a credit has been sold, it is transferred from the emission surplus of the seller to the emission reductions of the buyer. So, and then similarly, when a credit is retired, it is completely taken off market so that it can no longer be bought or sold. This is just to keep the balance and just to make sure that none of the credits are sort of bought or sold twice. And I think lastly, most registries, as I already said, also make relevant information accessible to the public via their digital platforms because they're mostly digital platforms. So this plays a major role in building project credibility and trust among buyers, sellers, and regulators because you have all the information you need regarding a project. And this can help you decide, like you can just be, as an investor, you can view the information there directly. It has been verified and you can decide whether you think it's worth investing for you or not. Then again, there are numerous registries available worldwide. I think Zainab and Ubaid both have already talked about them. I'll just quickly say that some of these are specific to like their local context, such as the American Carbon Registry, but most of them are international registries. So anyone across the globe can access them. Most of them have also been around since the time CDM was in operation, and now they're transitioning towards the newer systems as well. And each registry has, let's say, a slightly different set of requirements that you would need to fulfill in order to register with them, but their core functions are very similar and let's say in line with whatever I've discussed in the previous slide. And I think I'll let our colleague from Vera elaborate this further a little later. And just to finish off, because I think Dr. Sajid already rightly discussed this in the context of carbon markets, but since registries are like a main component of carbon markets, the benefit, let's say the importance they have for Pakistan is pretty much the same, because the bottom line here is that if you don't understand how a registry works, it is nearly impossible for you to enter the carbon market. And if you cannot do that, your project is, well, let's say it essentially remains invisible and it is untradable in the market itself. So I think I won't elaborate most of them, but let's just say the most basic benefit we have is in that we can get from understanding and engaging with registries is that, like as a project developer in Pakistan, is that it can open up a new, let's say, relatively large avenue for climate finance. our climate and energy transition needs are not, well, they're common knowledge. We already know that we need a lot of climate finance to meet those needs. And I think carbon markets can obviously help them. And since registries are like the backbone of the system, understanding them is obviously crucial. Then I think they can also help us prepare better for engaging in Article 6, as I think Ubaid already elaborated a lot, because if our national infrastructure is in line with like the registries themselves, it would be easier for us to actually access them and to benefit from the carbon markets as early as possible. So I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nisma, for highlighting this. With this, let me come to Rahman Saab. Rahman Saab, you have been in the debate, and thank you so much for joining us today. We understand we have been talking with you, and thank you so much, Win. We'll just be coming to you after Rahman as well. So Rahman Saab, especially talking about the theme of project development essential for registry validation. Let us sort of listen from you first regarding the case for Pakistan, because you have actually been working. We know Resources Future is very active in this space. So with this, I'll hand it over to you, and to Nisma. I'll request Nisma if you can also sort of respond to some of the questions that have been pasted in the Q&A box. I'll do the same. So Rahman sir, with this, over to you, and thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ubaid, and hello, everybody. I would like to start by thanking SDPI on bringing together this really important workshop. I think looking at the attendance today, it's very safe to assume that this is a topic that a lot of people in Pakistan are very much interested in understanding: the carbon market, the carbon project development landscape, how to go about a lot of the the requirements and the confusing pathways of project development. So I'll start with introducing myself and Resources Future. My name is Rahman Yusuf. I am based right now in Dubai, but I'm actually from Karachi, and I am a carbon market professional. Have had most of my experience in carbon project development in the NBS sector, but have also been working with standards and brokerages and different policy institutes on enabling the voluntary carbon market in Pakistan. I've also worked with nonprofits and project developing for profits both in Pakistan and internationally. So today I will be speaking on what is the validation process for registries, and I understand that the audience here is a mixed sort of audience. We have both people from the industry and people who are looking into becoming project developers themselves. So I'll try to keep my presentation interesting for both of them. About Resources Future, I'm working with Resources Future as a project development expert, and Resources Future is itself a project developer and also provides advisory on how to develop carbon projects of different types and methodologies. So, Ubaid, can you just confirm if you can see my full screen that I've shared?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
It's your full screen
awesome.
is available.
Awesome. So before I begin with the topic at hand, that's validation, just a little bit more info about what I am doing at Resources Future. So I'm leading a project on agroforestry in Sindh. And right now we are working with an on-ground implementation partner that is an NGO who has a lot of decades of experience working in rural Sindh. That's called Sindh Community Foundation, and we are designing a project on mango agroforestry for smallholder farmers in specifically Mirpur Khas district to participate for a multi-decade, I would say, agroforestry carbon finance project. It's based in Mirpur Khas district. It is focused on smallholder farmers in the district. It will be implemented in partnership with our on-ground implementation partner, the Sindh Community Foundation. Right now, we are working on the pre-feasibility, which is understanding what the project, how the project should be built, who it should target, what are the social impacts and the financial impacts that will come out of this project. And we target on starting a pilot project, which will be 3,000 hectares, and this project is scalable to around 30,000 hectares moving forward. So this is what I am, focused on working in Resources Future. And if anybody is interested in, finding out more about this project and would like to discuss how to participate in in this project, we would be very happy to, hear from you. So today's topic that I would be speaking on, keeping in mind that this is sort of a technical topic to be talking about, and I'll make sure that I keep things a little basic, but not too basic that it's not informative enough. So and Nisma rightly pointed out, that registries, or you can interchangeably say standards or GHG programs, are a very important stakeholder or component in the carbon project development process. They make sure that all projects are, real, transparent, and have measurable impact. And before you actually register your project on a registry or a GHG program, you have to understand the whole process that any standard or program offers. So validation and verification are two really very important steps for any sort of carbon project to be registered and to generate carbon credits out of that project. You can think of validation and verification as audit steps. The difference between them is that validation is a step that happens before a carbon project starts. This is something that happens during the project registration time, and it's a check of the project's design and calculation. So just like any audit, there is a third party that is involved in it, who acts as the auditor, or I would be calling them the VVB, the validation and verification body. They review the project in the validation phase before the project actually starts, implementing, to make sure that it follows the rules of the carbon standard, that it wouldn't happen without carbon finance, or in other words, as Obed explained, it is additional, that it is likely to reduce or remove greenhouse gases, and many other, of course, requirements that a methodology or a standard puts forward. So you can think of validation like an inspection that happens before you build a house, and it's basically a check of the blueprint of the design of the house, and give a thumbs up to the registry that this is a project that follows all the guidelines, all the rules, and we can move forward with the implementation of this project. Verification, on the other hand, is another audit process, but this happens once the project has been registered and once it wants to generate carbon credits. So the verification process happens at intervals. It could be annually, it could be every 2 years, it could be every 5 years, depends on what the project design document says. In this process, again, there is the VVB involved, the validation and verification body, and they check whether the project has gone according to plan, whether it has reduced or removed the amount of emissions that it claimed that it would remove or reduce, and whether there is evidence to prove all of the project activity. So what is validation and who does it? It depends on which GHG program or standard you are following as a project developer, whether it is gold standard, whether it's Vera, or Climate Action Reserve, ICR, or many of the different standards out there. One common thing is that they follow the framework set out by ISO 14064 and 14065, which are basically frameworks for validation and verification for environmental impact and greenhouse gases. The V&V, or the validation and verification framework for all programs and standards, is based on ISO and other frameworks that are basically above these standards, who provide guidelines for validation and verification rules. Obviously, as a project developer, it depends on who you're going with, which program you're going with, and which methodology within that program you are adopting. But some examples of VVBs, validation and verification bodies, from Vera's accredited list, are given here. These are just some of the examples. If you go on Vera's website, you will be able to see a long list of VVBs that are accredited that you can work with as a project developer. Moving on to the next slide. So just to make sense of the process, or let's say before I go on the process of validation and verification, just to make sure who is involved and what kind of information is shared between you as a project developer and the VVB and the GHG program. So these three stakeholders, I would say, in terms of the information exchange that happens during the project registration and the project implementation phases, are very, very important. So the GHG program interacts with the project developer in the sense that it provides the methodology, takes care of the project registration, issues the credit, and provides a lot of many other tools, modules, rules, and requirements for the project to happen, right? Then there is the interaction between the project developer, the PD, and the VVB, which is the third party auditor. This interaction is a scary one because the VVB basically audits the project, whether it's validation before the registration or it's verification after the project registration. Over here, the VVB reviews the project, requests corrective action, makes a validation report, checks all the project data, makes a monitoring and verification report. And there's a lot of to and fro between the PD, the project developer, and the VVB. Then there's the interaction between the GHG program or standard and the VVB, wherein as a third party, the VVB provides with information and go ahead or no go to the GHG program about the project that is being developed by the project developer. In that, it provides the GHG program with validation reports, verification reports, and there is a project review report that the standard releases for every project that's based on the review that the VVB does. So these three are really important stakeholders in terms of exchange of information when a project is developed, but then you can see all of these other stakeholders that are also part of the ecosystem of stakeholders when a carbon project is developed. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list. There are many, many, many more that are involved when you are developing a project, but these are just some that would be, I think, common in every project that is being developed. Moving forward, so the process or the question of how to get a project validated, and I've made this slide according to Vera's rules and requirements. Of course, it depends on which GHG program you're going with. The process would be slightly different, in that regard. So what you do when you have, developed the concept, developed the PDD, done all of the studies, the GHG calculations, mapped out all the stakeholders, are done with the consultation and everything. Basically, once you've completed your project design document, the PDD, the next step is to hire an approved validation and verification body, the VVB. So you select a Vera accredited VVB because they are authorized to, audit your project. Once you do that, the VVB reviews your PDD and conducts a validation audit, which may include a site visit. Mostly, it does include a site visit. And if the VVB finds issues, of course, they do find issues because they go into a lot of detail of your claims about GHG emission reductions and removals. They will issue some corrective action requests, or as we call them, CARs. Some other terminologies that you might want to know in this process is CR, or clarification request, where the VVB requests for explanation or more information, and FAR, forward action requests, which are non-critical issues at this stage, but they must be addressed later on in for example, during the verification stages of the project. So once there is a lot of to and fro between the project developer and the VVB, and this middle process takes some time to complete, what the result is that the VVB is satisfied with the project and gives a go ahead to the project developer that we will submit a validation report to the GHG program saying that your project is good to go. The project is then submitted to Vera with the PDD, with the validation report, and with any other documents. then it gets registered, and then it is eligible to generate carbon credits based on a frequent monitoring and verification cycle, where the project developer must verify the removals or reductions, once again by hiring a VVB. And like I said before, verification is the step that is done at intervals, at set intervals. Could be annual, could be 2 years, could be 5 years, depends on the project. So this is just a brief overview of how to get a project validated. I'm sure that our colleague from Vera is going to dive into a lot of detail about this. So I'll just quickly move on to my last slide. This one is specifically made for project developers who want to understand how to basically pass the validation and verification process, right? It's really, really very important that when you get into the process of developing a project, no matter how early stage you are, you understand what are the rules and requirements of the standard you're working with, and when the validation stage comes, what are some need to knows that you should address in the early stages so that you don't have problems later on. So understand your methodology deeply. There are so many rules, so many eligibility criteria, so many approaches to quantification, equations, etc. Other tools, modules, and accompanying documents that are part of any project methodology. Understand them very, very deeply as you're developing your project. Then engage your stakeholders early, no matter if it's a community-centric project or if it's some other kind of technology centric project. There are different stakeholders in every project. Engage them early and record every conversation that you're having with your stakeholders. This is important because when you have a good record of things, the audit process becomes easier, and so you don't have to go back and do the consultation again just to prove to the VVB that you have done this process. Then keep records of everything, prepare legal and land ownership proof, just make sure that everything is clear and documented before you implement the project. And again, start the documentation early. It's really important that any consultation, any action, any sort of data that is being collected for this project is documented, and it's documented early. One other thing that's really very helpful for new project developers is to review similar validated projects. For example, if you are planning on developing an afforestation project, go to the registries, find out the publicly available data, the PDD, the validation reports, the project review reports, and see how that successfully registered project went through the validation stage. It is really, really very helpful to see how others went through the stage so that you can inform how your project design can be amended at whichever stage you are. Being consistent across documents is very important. Whatever numbers, terms, assumptions you are using, they should be consistent across all of the documentation. Plan for multiple review rounds. It can get very frustrating for the validation stage to be very long because the VVB gets into very tiny details of your project. So just plan that it's not going to be a one-off thing where you provide your PDD and then it comes back validated. That's not going to be the case. There will be a lot of to and fro, so plan for that. Be ready to prove additionality and permanence. Prepare solid evidence for all of your fundamental claims. Have a monitoring plan ready. This is one of the basic requirements of developing a project. How you're collecting data. What are the data sources, what is the frequency of data collection, what is the data management plan, things like this. And then lastly, choose a VVB with the right sectoral, or I would say project type experience, where, for example, if you're developing a clean cook stove project, then choose a VVB that has more experience in validating clean cook stove projects rather than choosing somebody who has experience in validating mangrove restoration projects. So because of that relevance, it's good to have a VVB that knows exactly the project type you're working in, so that they can flag issues that are very relevant and to the point, and they don't flag unnecessary issues. So it's on the project developer to choose the VVB, even though they have to choose from an accredited list that's provided by the standard, but it's the project developers, discretion to go with whichever VVB. So interviewing the VVBs, understanding their cost, their pros and cons before actually hiring them and going through the process. So I think I'll stop here. And yeah, if there are any
Great.
questions,
Thank
I'm
you
happy
so
to
much.
answer them.
Thank you so much, Shaiman. That was extremely insightful and I believe very to the point for all the industries and the corporates sitting here, just to sort of go right into the document of what the check marks are, what is the exactly the 1 and 2, the 3 steps that they have to follow. So thank you so much for highlighting that. And with this, let me come to Mr. Vincent Tan, who's the regional representative, Asia and the Pacific from Vera. Again, it's really, really interesting to hear what the thoughts directly from Vera, one of the very key registries that does exist. So, Vin, thank you so much for joining us. I believe definitely Rahman has touched upon some of the points, but two of the points that we really look forward to listening from you is regarding, I believe, the project validation and project proponents, what they need to sort of provide. And secondly, I believe one point that we still need to further delve into is to sort of demonstrate these project ownership, what evidence shall actually be provided to establish the right of use coming from these different mechanisms. And secondly, I believe VVB has already been touched upon, but if you also would like to sort of share any point from your end. So with this, over to you, Vin. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for invitations. And I also thank Raman for the background that he has covered a lot of ground. So it makes my life easier. So I'm going to elaborate a bit further about the validations in this slide. Well, on a high level, there are two ingredients that you need to complete validations. Now, do remember, however, validation is the step before registrations. So in the validation stage, your project could still be rejected if you are able to meet some of the program's requirements or methodology requirements. So completing validations is a key milestone to registrations. Now, on high level, you have two key documents. One is called Project Descriptions Document, PDD, which you heard from Ube earlier. And second one is Evidence of Project Ownerships. Now, for project descriptions, you don't have to start from scratch. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are templates that you can follow. It's not just unique to Vera. I believe other standards have templates that you can use too. And this is basically a cheat sheet where you can use to describe your projects. So let me give you a flavor of what kind of information that you will need to provide. So this is version 4.4, and earlier the list you see two, now you see that the complexities increase is not easy. You look at the list, you have to talk about who is involved in the project proponents, the start date, the ownerships, descriptions for a project, locations, how does it comply with local laws? How do you ensure there's no double counting? And what are the contributions to sustainable developments? So that is just section number one. Then I think another major one is stakeholder engagement and consultations. How do you mitigate risks? How do you respect for human rights? And how do you ensure ecosystem health is all preserved? Then there's of course the methodology sections and how do you quantify them and monitor them. And if I can scroll down just to give you a flavor, so these are existing templates that you can use to fill up your project description very easily, which I encourage you to download it and have a look to better understand the requirements. So if I can go back to my presentations, also do know that certain methodologies, if you happen to select, I think certain methodologies that have already been digitalized, you do not have to submit a Word documents. You can actually go to our Project Hub, which is our website, to submit your projects digitally. Think about digital form. And that is one of our initiatives to speed up the process. Next point, one of the key elements is project ownerships. Now, this is taken from the program rules, but basically the project proponents will have to demonstrate that they have the legal right to control and operate the activities. Now, there are several types of evidence you can provide. One of them, if the evidence comes from statute, regulations, or decree. Otherwise, you have laws. But more commonly, we should be looking at contractual rights of equipments and lands. So if you're not the owner of the land, then you should have some sort of rights, contractual rights. Or in the number 4, you have agreements. So enforceable and irrevocable agreements. So it can't be memorandum of understanding. It has to be something that is enforceable, legally binding agreements. Or otherwise, it's the implementations of enforcement of law or from statutes, regulatory frameworks. So just to give you an idea how complex it can be, but these are all captures in the VCS standard version 4.7. It will give you the idea what are the key requirements. So that's the key documents that you should look at. Next, about the VVBs, or in layman terms, I like to call them the third-party auditors. So you get a pool of them, which are approved by Vera. That is, we can go to a website to look it up later. But basically what they're doing, and validations is only one time off. You do not need to do validations many times, which is very contrast to verifications. Verification is when you want to request for issuance, then you do it. Validation, one off. And it's up to the VVBs to go to ground to determine whether that project meets all the rules and requirements from the Vera programs. We, Vera, as a standard center, we don't go to the ground to audit the project, so to speak. We don't go to have site visits. This is because there's a potential conflict of interest. So the process is designed to have third-party auditors to come in. And the point the Raman that has mentioned earlier is up to the project to choose which VVB to engage. And Vera doesn't choose for you. And I think one of the key points that you also want to pay attention to is that to make sure the VVBs that you engage is actually accredited to validate or verify your projects. So let me give you examples here. If I can go to a website and navigate it. So if you go to, you type in validations and Vera, you reach this website here. Then if you scroll down to the VCS program, this is where you can find all the active VVBs. So you open it up, so you find a list of them. And commercially, I think it would make sense to find a VVB which is located close to the project site. Because if they need to have site visits, it's cheaper. So I think that makes commercial sense. So you want to choose somebody who is close to you. But also you want to choose a VVBs that can validate and verify your projects. For example, here, preferred by nature VVB. This is a VVB based in Estonia. But if you look at the kind of project they can validate and verify, they can only do AFALU projects, forestry projects, afforestation projects. If you have solar projects, you can't get them to validate or verify your projects. So that's one of the key point I want to raise. I think I reached my time limit, but happy to have more conversations on this. Pass it back to you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much, When that was really insightful. And thank you for showing us, taking us through those documents. So yeah, very well received. And I believe we do have a couple of questions. So I believe most of them, Rahman and Win, they're more relevant to you. So perhaps I'll just sort of give initially a quick summary of a few of the questions before coming to Bulan Suhail Saab. So I believe, Rahman, a couple of questions are, I believe, mainly around how to sort of get register any of the already existing solar. For example, Fatma has asked that how can we register an already existing solar power plant when we do have the records of avoided carbon emissions to monitoring? And I believe there are also similar projects that what is the possibility of having an already developed project getting registered for carbon credit selling? So perhaps if you can initially sort of touch upon those from your end. And I believe a couple of people have also asked how we can exactly be a part of the work that is being done by the Resources Future.
Yeah, thank you. So I think I'll start with the last question first. How can you be part of the project that I mentioned during my presentation, the Mango Agroforestry project? Basically, we are right now in the design phase of the project, and we're looking for all sorts of partners, from implementation partners to knowledge partners to also, more importantly, investors and funders who can, financiers who can push the project forward from pre-feasibility to feasibility stage, and then forward into the pilot and expansion stage. So get in touch with us. That's how you can, at least start the conversation. You can get in touch with me. I can provide my email address. It's rahman@resourcesfuture.com, or on LinkedIn, or just use the info@resourcesfuture email, which is on the website. So multiple ways to get in touch with us. Yeah, and for the other two questions, especially the renewable energy one, I think it really depends on a lot of the project factors. When did it start? When did the renewable energy generation start? When was the monitoring period that you mentioned has already been happening began? Which standard are you trying to go with? Which methodology are you trying to follow? It depends on a lot of factors that are specific to standard and methodology before you can answer that question. So broadly, yes, it can be eligible, but for a specific answer, you need to understand a lot of factors involved before getting a final answer.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rahman. So yeah, just taking one question before coming to Bulan Saab, that is from when they have initially, I believe there was a question regarding the registries. Are there any registries available for compliance markets, for example, for credits created through Article 6.2 or the ITMOs? And I believe a very similar question is, okay, so for Pakistan's National Registry, I'll respond later. But yeah, if you would like to sort of add anything in response to this, please.
So I'm going to try and make it simple. The current registry from the voluntary carbon market, not just Verra, Gold Standards, and Global Carbon Council, they can interact with compliance market. You do not need a separate compliance registry, so to speak. So I'll give you examples. In South Africa, their compliance market is in the form of tax, carbon tax. So they can either pay the carbon tax, or they can choose to purchase carbon credits from eligible standards such as Verra. I think they're only allowed to offset 5% of the taxable emissions, and that is using units issued by Verra. You can also check out Singapore, is also the same. So you don't necessarily need a compliance registry for that. Another key one, which is at global level, would be the CORSIA for airlines. So if you're international airlines flying between CORSIA signatories countries, they will be required to reduce their emissions. And one of the way is to purchase credits from the voluntary carbon markets. So I think the short answer is you do not need a separate registry. Do not necessarily.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. When we will be coming to the further question, but firstly, we do have, thank you so much for Bulan Suhail Saab with us. So just to sort of, before coming to the point that he'll be responding, let me sort of very quickly introduce him. Those who are working in carbon markets must know him. Bulan Saab is currently the managing partner at Suhail and Partners LLP with over 20 years of legal experience, and he specializes in the corporate law, regulatory affairs, but particularly talking about the work going under the carbon markets. He is a senior fellow on ESG and climate governance training at the PICG and IBA. He also sort of assisted the Ministry of Climate Change and Environmental Coordination in developing Pakistan's voluntary carbon markets framework, carbon credit policy 2024, and the carbon activity rules 2025. So he's also currently Pakistan's program coordinator for Cambridge University's DEMED Climate Education Program. So thank you so much once again, Bulan Saab, for joining us, and we really look forward to your responses on the workshop and what has been discussed. And at the same time, let me also sort of just mention some of the questions which I also believe you can also sort of respond to, because people have highlighted some of the points that when we talk about carbon markets, does it disincentivize real climate action? Whether we are saying that any of the wealthier countries can buy just credit instead of reducing their emissions, or environmental action. there are a couple of questions around when the policy guidelines will be finally approved, because we're using the words draft guidelines from there as well. But yeah, initially your overall reflection, and perhaps also if you want to sort of add on, touch upon anything around the climate finance side as well. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, feel free to interrupt me. I think let's make it conversational because I don't have a slide prepared. But I'm very happy to be here again at STBI's platform. You're doing wonderful work. And this is very timely, these actual workshops, hands-on practical workshops on carbon credit, exploitation, development, and understanding. I think there's a massive gap in the country at the moment on the technical side and the capacity side, and you guys are doing a wonderful job in filling the gap. And RF has also joined the initiative, which is amazing because Khurram Lalani is not only a brilliant expert, but he knows what is required to be done in Pakistan. So, look, my topic today, I was asked to speak a little last minute, but this is something that we've discussed on and off at various forums. And I think one of the most critical issues Pakistan faces is not the political willingness. I think the political willingness is there. I think the market is ready to invest in this area. But, there's a massive gap understanding how the regulatory pathways, do they really exist for this kind of financing? So, I'm going to talk about, the big gaping gap that we're facing today in our climate response, which is, are we regulatorily ready for climate finance? And I think the answer is no. The Article 6.2 framework is yet to be, notified by the government. And even if it is notified by the government, just notifying a framework does not enable climate finance pathways to come about. You see, in other countries, continents like Africa, there was a really homegrown movement from the universities for climate change. And they put in these frameworks 4 or 5 years ago, or 8, 7 years ago, and they're now really reaping the benefits. In our country, it's been a top-down approach. And to be frank and honest, top-down approach, the ministries can make a framework. Yes, they can do a lot of interventions in the budget, which they've done a really good job at, CPMA, budget tagging, climate tagging, etc., and so on. However, the climate financing pathways need to be created by regulators who are, in charge of financing overall in the country. And these are State Bank and the Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan. And the third major regulator is our Public-Private Partnership Authority. Now, in all these three regulators, the capacity to enable climate financing is extremely poor. For some reason, there hasn't been enough union or synergy between the climate ministry at the federal level and then these key regulators, who will enable climate financing to flow. But there's not all doom and gloom. The good news is that State Bank has developed the green taxonomy. That classification exercise has been done with the help of the World Bank. But I advise State Bank on this issue, and I advise SCCP as well, and P3A. My discussions reveal that even now, after going through that entire taxonomy exercise, there is still a huge gap in understanding on how do we actually put up projects around particular NDC areas. So we're working with them, but capacity again is a real constraint. So while they've classified sectors according to global green classification, which is not a big deal, what is lacking is these kind of workshops. These really intense, non-general, specific. I would go to a certain extent to say proprietary workshops. We need to go towards proprietary workshops, paid workshops, where there's a skin in the game brought by the banks, there's skin in the game brought by the industrial sectors, and there's skin in the game of these NDC specific regulators. So if it's a transport sector, we need to organize these banks and the regulators of banks, which is State Bank, and the various transport ministries and departments and attached departments, and we need to tell them, guys, this is the plan. By 2030, 2035, this is a target. We need to make a consortium of investors, domestic investors, who are interested in going into that transportation sector and putting funds into that sector. And for that purpose, they need the state bank to come up with guidelines, with regulatory pathways, with tenors of loans, with with specific products. What kind of lending instrument are we talking about? Are we talking about sukuk, ijara, Islamic financing? Are we talking about listed, unlisted? So this kind of conversation needs to be had in a very planned, centralized manner. And this conversation needs to be had between interested parties, Obed, between banks who are or have a history of lending to the transport sector, between transport companies like Daewoo and others who have skin in the game, and between the sector regulators, and between experts like SDPI, Resource Future, perhaps myself, although I'm a generalist, but still, this kind of organization really needs to take place. We keep lamenting about the fact that we don't have money. I think this country has enough money if it's organized properly. And there's only 7-8 sectors, as you know. There's urban, there's agri, there's transport, there's energy, so on and so forth. It's not rocket science. This kind of guidance and putting people in, getting them out of their silos, and putting them in a relevant environment, a workshop, a proprietary workshop environment. I think we really need to go towards this model. And I think we have enough international support. I'm personally working with Cambridge, I'm working with Oxford, I'm working with Durham, I'm working with King's College. I mean, these are just the universities I'm working with, let alone the World Banks and the ADBs and, Spark 6, etc. So there's a lot of interest in this to support Pakistan's initiative. We're very fortunate to be at a place where we have the political, capital behind it. We're doing it. We've come up with the first climate-friendly budget. The provincial departments are booming with energy around climate. I mean, I'm in Sindh right now. We had a meeting with the Sindh Climate Department and the Planning Department. I've firsthand seen data that they have gathered on so many various streams: methane, off-grid solar, riverine forestation, you name it. We're doing a conference in July with HEC Sindh, where 18 universities are joining. This is the first conference led by the universities, and then State Bank and PSX and all. I hope that you guys will also be joining this multidisciplinary effort. But like I said, we need to find pathways for regulatory and legal readiness for climate finance. And for that, we need to come up with a methodology of pedagogy, training, capacity building, but proprietary. I mean, they really need to have skin in the game. Interested sectors need to figure out, where do we wish to invest? Okay, we're in transport. Let's do CSR. We do CSR every year. Let's repurpose the CSR to ESG, and then let's talk to SDPI or Resources Future and ask them to bring, domestic finance capacities, regulators, other a holistic conversation around how this sector vertically and horizontally can come together to reduce those NDCs and how they can benefit. And once we do that exercise, I really believe that the world will come and matchmake with us. They will come and say, guys, you guys are organized. You maybe have done a pilot. You have feasibilities. Why don't we matchmake you with Heathrow Airport or whoever in our network? So that's where we need to, go towards. We need to be ready internally in order to be taken seriously by the buyers. So there's a lot of things to do, a lot of things on my plate, on our plate, your plate, everybody's plate. So we're looking forward to working together. Thank you. And thank you. If there's any questions, we'll be happy.
Thank you so much, Bulan Sahab. Yes, we do have questions, because we'll just close once the questions are addressed. So yeah, just I'll respond to a couple of myself, and then I'll come to Rahman and Win for the questions, because I believe 3 people have requested to respond on how do we see the power generation from biomass as a potential carbon trading project. But before that, let me sort of respond to 2 questions. That is, that does Pakistan have the carbon market policies? So I believe the point is that if you're talking about the voluntary compliance carbon market, no, it currently we do not have the structure in place. But if you're talking about the voluntary carbon market, so what we really need to sort of understand is that ministry is not sort of trying to come as a very strong sort of a regulator. What the ministry has issued are sort of the guidelines for carbon policy. Definitely, there are some documents that, especially if you're going through the Article 6 market, definitely there is a mechanism under which it should go. But this is sort of a more of a facilitative role that will be played by the ministry. But any project that actually, even as of now, as we speak, can actually go to the voluntary carbon market from Pakistan and register their projects and get credits from there. Just like I previously also mentioned, even as of now, the number of projects of Pakistan that are currently within the carbon market that are being created under the VCM, especially if you talk about the clean cooking ones as well. And secondly, I believe there are a couple of questions on what makes a project very ideal. I believe both Rahman as well as Vin has provided you very detailed and perhaps a long checklist. It's not that easy. There's a lot of factors that are there. If we can definitely talk about some of the very must ones, but again, it strongly depends upon what the project is. So we actually have to move from the project to a project as we actually go along those. So firstly, I'll request Rahman, if you can sort of respond a bit on for the case of Pakistan. Are there any sort of projects in your usme, or that are around the electricity generation from biomass? Yeah, if you have seen any of those, or if we can actually check from Vin, if you're with us, if you can sort of respond that as for the where do you sort of see the projects that generate electricity, particularly from wind, biomass being a part of the project pipeline that Vera actually has?
Sure, I think it will be easier for me to show as well rather than
Sure.
explain,
Yeah, that
because
would be
this is
perfect.
relevant to many of the questions being asked earlier. I think it would be useful if you look at one of the BCS standards, which is the program rules, and this is table 1. You actually get an exclusion table where it says what are the activities that are basically not eligible. And for biomass, if you scroll down here, so if you're looking to any activities that generate aided electricity and or thermal that is coming from non-renewables, agro-residue biomass, or forest residue, they are no longer eligible unless they are in least developed countries. So Pakistan is not one of the least developed countries. So any activities generating electricity heat would not be eligible. However, there's exclusions. So if you're looking at gasification, pyrolysis, biogas, then it is possible. So there are exceptions. This is same thing with solar as well. The hydropower is up there, then you have solar here. If it's grid connected, then it's not eligible. So it would be very helpful to take a look at this table 1 give you an idea about eligibility.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, I believe the question has been perfectly responded to, more around the biomass one as well. So thank you so much, Win, for responding to that. If Rahman, if you have anything particular to sort of respond to this point further as well from your end, yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the questions was about what kind of projects are already registered in Pakistan. So I think I'll also follow Vin's strategy and just show instead of tell. It's very easy to see what kind of projects have been registered or are in the pipeline, or are maybe inactive or rejected by Vera, for example. So this is just Vera's registry, which is publicly available. What I've done here is that I've just selected Pakistan as the country to see what kind of projects are there. And you'll see there's different kinds, project type. If you look at this column, there's projects in energy demand, in manufacturing industry, in the agriculture, forestry, and other land use sector. But mostly what you notice is projects are in the renewable energy sector. For example, this one, the wind power project
Yes.
by Master Wind Energy. Some of them are around clean cooking. Some of them, one of them is on agroforestry. So the point is, there's multiple projects you can see here on Vera, but then there's also some you will see on Gold Standard and other registries, and you can find out details about each of these projects by just clicking on them. For example, if I click on this project, you'll find a lot of detail on what this project is about, if there are any documentations that are publicly listed. And so just go into the, the research yourself by, following
Perfect.
a lot
Thank
of
you.
publicly available data on the
Yes,
registry.
thank you so much, Rahman. And Rahman, just one question, perhaps it also sort of initially links to you. I can also later respond to it. That is, how can the companies start reporting their emissions? Is there any framework currently in use to report the emissions? Yeah.
So I think for this question, I would not be the best person to answer this question, because this is about country emission reporting. Maybe someone from the ministry, if
Yeah.
they're available, would be better to
Sure,
answer
perhaps
this.
we'll come back to this one as well. So yeah, I think again the one question that eventually comes up that is constantly coming up is, and again let me Win, if you would like to sort of respond to it, that is again how does I mean, does carbon markets or these carbon trading disincentivize real climate action when wealthier countries can actually keep buying credits instead of reducing their GHG emissions or environmental impact, which make countries like Pakistan vulnerable to climate disaster? I believe this is the question that has been there since the very start of the carbon markets. So, yeah, but we do look, but yeah, I'll first let you sort of respond to it. Yeah.
So there are several angles, but I think the easiest angle for us to ponder or upon is think about the cost of decarbonization. We have climate change, which is a global issue. All countries, as part of the signatories for the Paris Agreement, need to do their bits, although differently, different responsibility. But who should bear the cost of decarbonization? If projects can't generate carbon credits and have them sold to developed countries and to the rich tech countries, three companies that emits a lot, then we are asking our local corporates or local people to bear the cost of decarbonizations, or to collect tax from the people and use that tax to decarbonize. I don't think that is just transitions. I think that is the reason why carbon markets is in place, as we in Article 6.2, to help climate finance to flow to countries. And also about the emitters, there are penalties. They won't be allowed to continue doing what they're trying to do. There's a lot of scrutiny in the market now. If they think they can get away just by purchasing carbon credits and not doing anything about their emissions, or you should look at how many lawsuits are there right now against some of these companies who are major polluters. So there are penalties, and people know that if you're trying to get away from the system.
Yes, thank you so much, Win. I believe we do have the number of questions, but I believe for today we are already 2 minutes above the time. So I'll come to Ms. Saliha Qureshi for the final concluding. But let me show you. With this, I'll also sort of request you all to please do join us tomorrow, as well as we'll be talking a lot again about the case studies in Pakistan. And we do have these relevant experts with us tomorrow as well. And for the 10 questions or comments that are remaining, we'll definitely responding to you, starting with the response to your questions tomorrow. But with this, let me come to Saliha for the final concluding and closing of today's session. Saliha is currently leading the Pakistan Industrial Decarbonization Program at SCPI. So with this, for the final vote of thanks, over to you, Saliha. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Subad, for the wonderful moderation today. And thank you all, the experts, the participants. I think we have a wonderful participation today on the enhancing the carbon market readiness in Pakistan. And I think it's the one of the series we have on the capacity building we have conducted over the last year. Today's session was to explore the, how to register in the carbon markets, and how to navigate on the carbon registries. And we also have a day 2 on which we will explore the MRV system for carbon markets in readiness in Pakistan. So we will have experts on that as well. But today I would thankful to the experts who shed light on the project developments and the registries, and the opportunities Pakistan have, and the challenges that highlighted in the carbon market journey as well. We also have very good participation today, and we hope that we will have a similar similar participation tomorrow from the private sector, government sector, and development partners as well. And I especially on behalf of STPI, thankful to Mr. Rahman Yusuf from Resources Future, who for his technical inputs on the project development essentials for the registry validation. Mr. Winsome Tan from Vera on the registry process as well, and Mr. Buland Sohail for his wonderful inputs, and also Ms. Nisma and Ms. Zainab for their inputs on that as well. Yes, I think we will have this tomorrow session on the MRV system, and we hope that we will see you tomorrow, and have a good day. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much, Saleha. It has been again for very engaging discussion. Let me just sort of mention to Ms. Nikita Pandey and Saddam, we will definitely be responding to your questions the first thing in tomorrow. So please do join us. Just for the time limitations, we couldn't actually respond to all of the questions, but yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Looking forward to seeing you again tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.